Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. Got an action-packed show today, bringing the mailbag back because I get accused of having Michigan hire Jim Harbaugh. So we'll get into that later on the show as I get attacked for Michigan's poor performance this year. But the big one, Steelers getting set to be screwed by the NFL because I know this is going to happen. The owners approved a 16-team playoff as like an emergency. It happened last week, so it's probably old news, but I wanted to explain it since I know we got a lot of Steelers fans listening to this. Basically, if games get canceled, and states are already starting to shut down, and I'm already in a negative mood, so I'm pretty positive that this is going to just screw the entire Steelers season because something's going to happen with Ben. Like, he gets dinged up every game. But the way they're setting this up is if games get canceled, like if they can't fulfill the actual season, instead of pushing back the playoffs, they're just going to eliminate the bye. So right now, only one team gets a bye, which has changed from past years because you had the wild card weekend where it was two teams get a bye, and then two wild card teams play the lower two division winners. That's gone this year. There was only going to be one bye because they already expanded it to 14 teams, which I think is already approved. So no matter what, that's going to be the base. Steelers are undefeated right now, one game up on the Chiefs. We'll get into the Ravens game here in a little bit, but they have a 3-game lead on them. So it's looking good to make the playoffs. The Steelers would have to lose out to even get into a question right now because they're already 9-0. And I mean, you're looking at an expanded playoff. A lot of years you get nine win teams in, and I don't see 7 losses on their schedule. So I don't want to say they're a lock because that might come back to bite me if there's injuries or whatever. But they're in position to get the bye, and now the owners are kind of like, yeah, we really don't have anything else to do except to try to make it fair. We're just going to add one more spot. What are your thoughts on it?
I'm almost wondering if they add the extra spot as a safeguard to say, here's the top 8. If one of these teams comes down with COVID, they can just scratch that, go back to their initial format, still have the top seed, have a bye, and you still have everyone covered.
Well, see, right now, there's still going to be a team left out, at least in the AFC, which is our main focus on this show. You have Baltimore lost, so they're in a, 5-way tie, 6-way tie? It's actually a 6-way tie, with 6-3 is their record. So if they were to end it right now, the Tennessee Titans would miss the playoffs if COVID hit and they said, we're just going to end it. 16 teams are in, so the top 8 on each side.
Which is crazy to think because 4 weeks ago, Tennessee was the top seed.
Yeah, Steelers were playing them for what we thought were going to be one of the top seeds in the playoffs, home field advantage, at least, because that's what you're looking at. You're thinking, no way the Steelers are going to be 9-0. Let's get home field advantage in the playoffs, which they would still get that unless they do something drastic. But the Browns would get in because they would have the tiebreaker over Tennessee based on win percentage in common games. Like, that's how crazy it would be to get down. And I know the owners looked at it, and they looked at the NFC, and they said, look, we're stretching it right now with 8 teams because you would get the Bears as the 8th team at 5-5. And so, you don't want to add another team or another 2 teams just to get another bye and get back in there to try to make it fair. I mean, let's be honest. Teams are already playing close to double-digit games. They're going to at least have double-digit games. We know which teams are playoff teams. We know which teams are close to playoff teams. If Dallas gets left out at 2-7, or the Eagles are even 3-5-1 right now, they're division leader. It would be shocking if one of those teams came back and actually made a run in the playoffs. I just don't see it this year. You're going to expand the playoffs, and we're going to see what happens. But now those teams. Like a wildcard team in the past, you get hot, you only have to win a couple games in a row. You're adding more teams, more games. It's just going to be tougher for those teams to make a run, I think. Because, like, in the NFC, we'll just stick with them. You have the Seahawks. Russell Wilson has been just crushing me because he cost me my fantasy game this week. And he was doing so good in the MVP race, but now he almost upset the entire NFC, especially the NFC West, because now, since they started to lose to division rivals, they're falling behind the Rams and the Cardinals. So in that scenario, you're going to have 3 NFC West teams make the playoffs. Even if they don't expand it to 8 right now, that's what you're looking at. So it's going to be a crazy year in terms of which divisions are going to be competitive. Because remember, the 49ers made that Super Bowl last year from that division. They're 4-6 right now. They would be the only team that I would think would have a legitimate beef with a shortened season, other than, say, the Steelers losing a bye, being undefeated. Because, like, in the NFC, you don't have an undefeated team. Green Bay and New Orleans are both tied 7-2, and Green Bay beat New Orleans head-to-head. So they get it. Do they really deserve a bye? I don't think so. Same record, so you can't really push that. I mean, you could say, oh, they got the head-to-head, but they're only 1 game up. The Steelers have a 1 game over the Chiefs. It could come down to both of them. I don't know what the tiebreaker would be right now, but just looking at the NFC, I would think the 49ers, if they could complain, the rest of their teams you can say, like, oh, just win your division. But the 49ers, like, they could get cut out. And I wonder if the NFL just kind of said, like, look, we're going to make it a little bit easier for you to get in, just in case your division games get cut out. Because they play the Rams next week, or this week, and then they end the season with the Cardinals and the Seahawks. Those would be the games that get cut. So the 49ers could have, like, no chance to make up in the division if it comes down to, like, a divisional tiebreaker or something. So they're in no man's land where they just have to win. And it's not like they have a tough schedule. You play the Rams, which you would think, if you're down, you got to beat them to get in the playoffs. Then they have the Bills, another tough game. But then they get into the NFC East. Washington, Cowboys, before they get back into their Cardinals-Seahawks division enders. So if they would somehow pull out a game against the Rams or the Bills, get to 500, and you get your 2 easiest games canceled, like, then it's almost like, I think that's why the NFL said, we're going to expand it. You have your chance to get the 500 or whatever to win, but I just don't see it. I mean, I know that they're going to make up the television revenue because the playoff games are so hot. It's much easier for them to say, let's get the logistics in place for 1 more playoff game on each side, let the TV stations bid over it, and just go from there. Because that's going to be one of the things where you're getting into some of the TV contracts and stuff. And I did have it up because I wanted to bring it up because we talked about the NFL type stuff. And they said, like, the Masters, because it was one of the things that annoyed me. They had the Masters on during the NFL. They pushed the other game back. And they said it was the lowest ratings since 1957. So, like, the World Series, NBA Finals, Stanley Cup Finals, U.S. Open, Triple Crown, all had all-time lows this year. Because for whatever reason, they just decided to go up against the NFL. I don't know when the Masters normally is played.
April.
That's what
it's right around my birthday.
Because I was so confused. I was looking for the dates to get a regular time, and I knew it was in the spring. Because if you remember, they did the celebrity game instead. Wasn't it like Tom Brady and Peyton Manning?
Yes.
And people like that. And that had great ratings in May. So it was weird that they would just cut it, push it up against football. So I was like, I can't be crazy in thinking that that's what they did, but that's exactly what they did. So, I mean, you're taking all these sports that don't traditionally compete, and then I'm turning on saying, like, all right, let's get one of my games on, and the Masters on, I immediately turned it off. I had 2 TVs, and that one TV just sat there, blank. It's like, can't watch my 2 games. I'm too lazy to put something else on. I didn't want to watch golf. It was a blowout anyway, so that might have had something to do with it. But I just don't think people want to sit around and watch golf whenever it's nice weather. You can be outside. So that's my thoughts. Do you have anything on the NFC before we get back to the AFC stuff?
Trying to think. I was surprised that Kirk Cousins pulled off his first Monday night win. He's now 1-9 in Monday night games with the Vikes.
I know he screwed me too because I had a slim chance of winning last night until Thielen caught those 2 touchdowns. I thought, of course, you haven't thrown to him the past couple weeks. He's been bitching at you, Cousins. So you decide, on Monday night, we'll go back to him. But I don't blame him. I still blame Russell Wilson. There was a play where Russell Wilson could have just ran for the first down. Instead, he had a guy that was wide open on like a wheel route. Instead of throwing it to him, he started to scramble for no reason and then threw it to him late and it was intercepted. And I thought, bro, you're already scrambling. You could clearly see that there was no one in front of you. He might have even been, all he had to do was make one linebacker miss. He could have ran for the touchdown. Like, I don't know if he could outran him. I don't remember who was in front of him. But he like had one guy in front of him. He would have easily got the first down. He could have just got the first down and slid. There was plenty of time left. Or just stand in the pocket and throw the wheel route. The guy was wide open. And he obviously saw him. But he was like, all right, I got to get... like, phantom pressure is getting to him at this point. And so it's weird. The Seahawks are doing their collapse. And they always seem to do it. But the way he started so hot, I thought the Seahawks are going to run away with the NFC. But they're just not doing it. And then Drew Brees gets hurt. Punctured lung. And he was still on the field. And he had to shake them off. So I don't understand what the protocol was for that. I mean, he was hurt and having trouble breathing. I didn't think it was a punctured lung. I figured it was cracked ribs. But I thought, like, I know they have like the super high tech rib thing, but I thought at least check him out. Like, he's just standing there, and then finally he's like, I just can't go. So,
and they ate another dub.
But I will say the drawings that they're doing, was it on Fox? They put his drawing up. They made him look like a 90-year-old man. Like, I know he didn't sign off on that. Like, I know the guy's bald, but like, why would you make him look like an old grandpa?
Because that's what he is now.
People are like, what is that? And then everyone was saying like Hills was the worst one. Like their quarterback / tight end or whatever they use him as. And I'm like,
that is bizarre that it's like tight end / quarterback.
Well, they always say quarterback, but he's like never in as a quarterback. And so it always throws me.
He goes in and it's like an automatic run, and he still picks up like 20 yards a carry. It completely boggles my mind. It's like they never even let him throw like a pretend pass. It's like you get out there and you run, and then like nobody loads the box up. It's not like he's running into like a 5 or 6 man surface in the box. Like, oh, this may be the time he throws. Nope, quarterback power again.
You know what that reminds me of? It gives me flashbacks to 2006 when Tim Tebow would run out on there. And he would do the same thing. They're like, oh, is that Tim Tebow's music? Surely we've got to get into prevent defense because he's going to throw it deep. Meanwhile, his only pass was like that tight end pop pass.
Yeah, and that playoff win.
Yeah, that was like the only thing. Like he would come in for Chris Leak, I think was the Florida quarterback. But he would only do the runs his first year or the tight end pop pass. It was like, you guys can't cover either of those? What are you doing?
Well, Bill Belichick saw it and was like, hey, Cam Newton, we have an offense that's built special for you.
It's the same offense. I still get frustrated at that. But they've been winning. Well, I guess I don't know if I would say they've been winning as we shift into the AFC stuff. They're back right below 500. It would be hilarious if like it did go to 18 playoffs and the Patriots were the 8th seed and they jumped the Browns. Like, I would think that's hilarious for me because the Browns are right there and you think like, oh, they're having a great season. What better way to ruin it than if they'd get pushed out of the playoffs? Because, well, the Ravens, they tried to come back in that game against the Patriots, but it was like perfect timing. It started to downpour. I don't know if you watched it. They didn't even have a chance for a Hail Mary because Lamar Jackson threw the ball. I think it was a running back. wide open. I think it was around the 50. So they could at least had a Hail Mary chance like the Cardinals did to win. He just dropped it. Like, it was such a downpour. The guy was wide open. He could have easily caught it and ran out of bounds. And then the last play, it was like, is over. Or that might even been a fourth down. I think it was a fourth down. I don't think they had a last play. I think they just nailed it. So it was like, okay, that's typical Ravens for you, though. They come out. Do they make adjustments? A lot of people are blaming on Greg Roman. And I was wondering, too, like, was he the one? Was he the reason behind Jim Harbaugh's success? I mean, he comes to the Ravens, and they light up the NFL for 1 year. In terms of offense, did it catch up to him? I think that's what happened with the Bills. He had one great year with Tyrod Taylor, I think, as his quarterback.
Yep.
And then once teams figured out his gimmick, it's like he never adjusted. And so I wonder if the Baltimore Ravens are going through the same thing, because they don't really have any consistent like running game. Like I had said, I said they need a power guy. They get Dobbins. I think, that's going to be perfect if they use him as like their running back one. But they don't have a guy that they can consistently go to eat clock or anything. So I think it's just extending plays, and then you get Lamar Jackson out there running around crazy, and it's not going to work out. But the AFC, I think, is wide open other than the top two teams. Like, the Bills could be up there, but I'm not sold on them yet. How you feel about them?
I think they are a team to contend with. I mean, yeah, they lost on a Hail Mary this past week, but I think that they've been playing much more consistently. I think they're getting more out of Josh Allen. For as much as people have criticized him in the past, he's cut his turnovers way down, and they're scoring points. I think that they are a team that could be a player going forward.
The only reason I'm hesitant on them is because they're 7-3 right now.
You're going to go against the Bills Mafia.
I'm going to say that their record is padded by two awful Jets wins. Like, around the top teams, they're about 500 right now. They lost to the Titans, the Chiefs, and the Cardinals. Those are all playoff teams as of right now. They beat the Seahawks and the Rams and the Raiders, which would be playoff teams. So, like, you're looking at a 3-3 team if you cut out all the games against losing record teams. All right, maybe I missed the Dolphins, so maybe they are 4-3. Are the Dolphins in the playoffs, or are they one of the teams that are out? No, they would be in.
They're on the bubble,
so they'd be in. So that's the one thing that I'm looking for. I'm wondering how much is it just the Patriots got the loss to them, they were down, and then the Jets like pad that. But we'll have a chance to see, because they got to play the Steelers. And they got to play the Patriots and Dolphins again, if the season goes that far, which who knows what's going to happen. But they do luck out. They play the Chargers and then the 49ers, both teams that they should be able to win against if they are a playoff team. So they could realistically be looking at clinching their spot soon. I don't know what the clinch is going to look like this year with so many teams tied at the top. But the other big team, the Colts with Phillip Rivers, I don't know. They're in the same situation for me. I don't know how to feel about their record. Is it just because of the division? So you're going to get one team, unlike the NFC East where they're all bad, beating each other up. It's like, all right, they lost to the Browns, they lost to the Ravens, they even lost to the Jaguars. So they're beating up on like the Vikings, the Jets, the Bears, the Bengals, the Lions. Those don't sound like winning teams, Matt.
Fair enough.
So that's the one thing that would shock me, is if somehow the Titans, which look like a much better team, miss the playoffs because of that head-to-head loss to the Colts right now. That'd be another team that I guess I didn't think of mentioning earlier, where if it's cut off, that's the reason they're out of the playoffs, is because they lost to the Colts one game. Season done. No need to worry about adding that ninth team. Like, shouldn't have lost to the Colts, man.
Can't lose to an old Phillip Rivers.
That's a guy, too, you never know. Just because the division, he played out west for so long, they might have just had so much film and experience with him. Goes to a new division, might just be fresh enough to get some regular season wins, and then in the playoffs, anything can happen. But I don't know. I'm not sold on them. I'm not really sold on the Raiders either as my last team to talk about. John Gruden
they scored the most points.
Did you see what he did?
Did he wear a mask this week?
The audacity. No, he drove the bus around the Arrowhead Stadium to taunt the Chiefs after they beat him. Andy Reid complained about it. You didn't see that?
Andy Reid saw it?
Andy Reid complained about it, Matt. He said they don't do things like that after the Chiefs win. He said he doesn't know why John Gruden had the bus driver around beeping around the stadium, but they noticed.
Well, maybe if he would have paid more attention to his game plan and not worried about what John Gruden's doing, he would have won.
Well, I liked John Gruden's response because everyone seems to apologize these days. Like, for no reason, like, yeah, I'm really sorry if that offended anyone. John Gruden said, maybe the bus driver was talking trash and we were beeping at him. Maybe maybe one of the city bus drivers were talking trash to us loading up, so we were beeping at them on the way out of the stadium. He's like, I didn't even think of Andy Reid or something like that. I thought, perfect, yeah. How petty of you that you're like, there's that bus driver that was talking trash. Beep at him.
Go get him. Go get him.
Like a bunch of high school kids yelling out of the bus. They're like, what school is that? Oh my gosh, that's the Raiders. Is that John Gruden driving that? Just yelling obscenities at them. So I thought that was funny. So maybe they are pretenders. If you start to talk trash like that, you have to think you can back it up.
Well, with almost both having two running backs almost go over 100 yards, they're getting the ground and pound going. He starts pounding the rock. Look out.
And, I mean, I've been using the weak division as like a thing to look out for. But other than the Chiefs, that division, and they play them, of course, is it this week? Yeah. So they play the Chiefs right after. That must have been why they're talking about him doing the bus horn beeping, trying to get hype ready for – because it's a night game. Is it Monday night? I don't know my dates. So maybe that's why. Maybe that's why I heard that rumor. I guess it's not really a rumor if Andy Reid's complaining about it. But they have like an easy schedule down the stretch, I think. They play the Chargers, the Broncos, the Dolphins, which are a playoff team right now, but I'm not sold on. They also play the Jets and the Falcons. So they could theoretically split with the Chiefs and still be pretty set making the playoffs. But again, you got to play the games. They were fine. The Steelers were fine for not wearing masks too. I don't know if we even talked about that. But I think that stuff's just getting crazy.
And it's worth noting that the Philadelphia side of Pennsylvania is starting to push more heavily into quarantine. So that could be something that I could see affecting the Steelers down the road, that if Governor Wolf continues to start pushing people back into lockdown, that could be something that could affect Pittsburgh going forward.
But I thought about that, and I think that the state of Michigan set the precedent because they went into extreme lockdown too. I think it was last week? I don't know. I don't remember when it was. Maybe it was this weekend. But it was before Philly announced theirs, at least to my knowledge. And they were asked about professional sports, and they said that they were exempt because of how often they are able to test. So they're kind of free to do whatever as long as they're able to test. And I watched one of the Pennsylvania things today, and they kind of said the same thing. Like, if you're able to do 3 tests or whatever, then you're pretty much able to move around as needed. And I think that they're just letting that loophole go because they know that if things start to shut down and then you cancel the Steelers and they're undefeated, like, shit will hit the fan. Like, Ben Roethlisberger doesn't get a year back on his life if the season's canceled. And if they were, I know you make fun of me for telling colleges to claim national championships. If the season just ended and there was no playoffs, Steelers should 100% get the Lombardi Trophy. I'm not even joking, Matt. They should just get the Super Bowl trophy and then that's it. And if they're like, well, what are they going to use for the game film? They just broadcast on Super Bowl Sunday a montage of their highlights from the season. Like Ben Roethlisberger hitting the leg, then he comes out of the tunnel, and they're like, Ben's back. And then he throws a touchdown. I don't know why you're laughing. If the Chiefs wanted a montage in another Super Bowl, they wouldn't have lost to the Raiders, Matt. And then they let them drive the bus around taunting them. They should have known better.
And always beat Gruden when you have the chance because he'll taunt you.
Yeah, it's not like they can claim a split championship. Could you imagine if the NFL did something so stupid when the Steelers are clearly Super Bowl champs right now? Maybe they should just cancel the rest.
I was actually thinking about that it would be such a slam against Pittsburgh to be like undefeated and then just be like, all right, season's done.
COVID. And you know that they wouldn't let them claim championship.
You'd never get to admit, like, no, do they win out?
They would just get a AFC North plaque or something. Like it wouldn't even be an AFC, like a divisional championship, or it wouldn't be a conference one. It'd just be a division.
AFC Central buttons for everyone.
They'll have a picture of a Three Rivers
and get a bucket.
They'll have a Three Rivers Stadium pin. Complimentary. Hey, I still have my Heinz Field coin somewhere. People talk trash on me. I have the inaugural game. I think it was pushed back because of 9/11. Not if I should be spewing non-facts on the show. But I was at the first game, or at least they gave us a commemorative coin when we went for Heinz Field opening. I don't know if we looked that up on the show or not, but that's how far back my connection with the Steelers are. So I know I'm waiting for the pain. I'm waiting for Ben Roethlisberger's shoulder to just be dislocated. Or whatever. He got dinged up in the game. And I thought, what game doesn't he get dinged up in? And that's why I think they should still sit him.
No, maybe they won't have to sit him. He did all that work during COVID. You saw that montage of him throwing.
Which was so cut. It was like one of those YouTube girls trying to read their script where it's like 30 cuts because they can't read one sentence. It's so hard to watch. I forget because I just watched an ad that I saw on TV and I thought, like, I don't know who this person is, but did the TV person not even say, like, hey, we can't use this for our ad because you have 30 cuts in it? It was like you're not even reading the sentence. So that's how I look at it. And that's when I looked at Ben's throwing thing and I thought, oh, God. They might have just clipped a Mason Rudolph pass in between that. Well, as soon as his hand let go of the ball, they just cut to someone else.
No, because if it would have been any of the other quarterbacks, the ball would have been thrown either right at the ground or 35 feet over his head.
True. They need a guy like Hill that they can just put in there to run the ball. Teams won't know what's coming. Looking at the Steelers, though, as we wrap up the NFL stuff, if they did a bye or they got rid of a couple games, like I think it only benefits them. They play the Jaguars. Tomlin seems to have the head on straight. He said they have a ridiculous level of respect for the Jags.
Which means they're going to lose to them this week.
Well, to me, it's better than him. Normally, Tomlin would be like, yeah, they're a great NFL team, or whatever he normally says, and then they would not be prepared. But for whatever reason this year, like that Bengals beatdown, I was expecting that to be a lot closer than what it was. Same with like the earlier Browns win. Like I know he has film on them, but normally they just play teams close. And so maybe this is the year where they take teams that they know that they can beat, and they just beat them. I know I'm hoping too much because it'll be a Jaguars loss, a Ravens win, and then a Redskins loss. That's how the next 3 weeks are going to go. But what do you think with the Jags? Do you think they get that win?
Yeah, I think that they're doing what they need to be doing. They're playing the way that we've been expecting them to play for probably 5 years. And they're getting the production out of Roethlisberger where you're not getting 2 touchdown passes and 3 or 4 interceptions and having it come down to the wire. Like They truly are playing like a top seeded team, and with the defense generating some turnovers and just playing consistent, they're playing about as well as you could ask for right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's on the road. I would say that they're going to win just because why bet against them at this point?
Well, and you got to factor in that Minshew's hurt, so the mustache magic isn't going to be there for him.
Do they even have the line here? Yeah, the Steelers are a 10-point spread. I don't know if I would take the spread. But again, it's so weird this year because normally you'd think they'd play everyone close. And I don't know. I don't even know if I could touch that.
I would take it.
So, all right, anything else you have for the NFL?
No.
My transition will be my man Antonio Brown. Like, come on, bro, you're doing good in fantasy. I got you. You helped fill up my team as long as Russell Wilson starts to turn it around and McCaffrey stops being hurt. But you can't get in trouble. He was at an HOA or something, and he smashed their camera. Did you see that come out?
Well, yeah. I mean, why wouldn't you smash a camera when you have an opportunity?
But, Matt, they were like, no big deal. Could you just replace it? And he didn't do it. That's how the whole thing came out. That's what's so crazy to me. Like, you just signed a contract for millions of dollars, and you're thinking, oh, I'm on thin ice, man. Let me just smash this camera. And they're like, hey, no big deal. We don't want to get you in trouble with the NFL. Could you just replace the camera? And he's like, no, son. No, you're gonna have to escalate that to the NFL. See what happens. It's like you have the simplest choice in front of you. Just replace the camera. No one would ever have heard about it.
But I think he's done this from Pittsburgh to Oakland to New England to Tampa. Like, he's done this like 6 different times.
But he's living with Tom Brady now.
But I thought he was doing that when he was in New England too.
I don't know. Maybe it's like hanging out.
But only for a week. All right, AB, you gotta get out of here. That was fun, but
no, it's probably like
gotta go.
It probably ends up like this: like Tom Brady, they're watching something, eating pizza or something. And Tom Brady's like, "I gotta go to the bathroom. I'll be right back." He comes back. He's like, "Where'd AB go?"
He's just running down the road, just smashing stuff.
He's outside smashing a camera. He's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, you went to the bathroom. I didn't know what to do."
You were in there for too long. I thought they got you.
I didn't know what to do with my hands, Matt. So I just started smashing. So I don't know. That's my off the cuff thing. I mean, whatever. Steelers have a 3-game lead. Will they blow it and lose the division? Probably not. So hoping for a home field advantage. Antonio Brown. I mean, it's definitely the clear decision to get rid of him. Everyone kept saying, "Oh, maybe the Steelers should bring him back. Maybe they should bring back Le'Veon Bell." Maybe they shouldn't. You know, they have a good thing going. They don't need the headaches. If Tom Brady wins with them and he gets a Super Bowl win, then I'll change my tune. But right now, I mean, he does give him a lot of weapons on that offense. There are so many weapons that he's never had that in New England. So that's my last tidbit. Getting into the mailbag, I teased it at the top of the show. Let me get it out real quick because I changed the topic. Like Harbaugh, for people that don't know the story, if you listened to the podcast before, when I had student tickets at Michigan, it was the Brady Hoke year, 2014. Jeff used to come on as a guest of the show. He hasn't been on for a while, but he went to one of the games with me. It was Minnesota, 2014. Shane Morris was the quarterback, got a concussion. Brady Hoke sent him back in the game. So we just started chanting, like, hire Harbaugh. Because I was like, we can't have this anymore. So we started a hire Harbaugh chant. So now people are coming at me. They're saying, this is your fault for Harbaugh falling apart. Because ESPN picked up on it. They said that we were chanting fire Hoke. But it was very clear on the broadcast that everyone was chanting hire Harbaugh in the stadium. So pretty cool. And I'll take full responsibility. Because it wasn't supposed to be like this, Matt. Harbaugh came in, and I don't know.
He's going to bring that updated offense from 1991 and things are just going to be like the good old days.
Well, I'll tell you, because I keep getting a lot of people are stuck on the offense saying like, hey, why doesn't Harbaugh just like get another offensive coordinator? If people are watching the games, Harbaugh is calling the plays. Someone said that, hey, he's not calling the plays anymore because remember how he would take forever to call a play and then keep getting delay of games? And I was like, yeah, that was a thing. He did that in the NFL too. They would say that he would have two guys, a run coordinator and a passing coordinator. They would each call a play and he would pick which one he wanted to run. Which
Heads, it's you. Tails, it's you.
Well, you would think that some of those would be, okay, well, that might work out. But, I mean, it got the 49ers to the Super Bowl. I almost said the Steelers. But he got up there to the Super Bowl, and he had a running quarterback at that time. So it probably was a lot more flexibility in terms of what he could call. He had Alex Smith. I mean, that one playoff game, Alex Smith ran a bootleg to, was it beat the Saints? Or I forget which game it was. That was a while ago. And then he had Colin Kaepernick, which a lot of defenses weren't prepared for. So then he went to Michigan. He had the same system, pass coordinator, run coordinator, and they did pretty well the first 2 years. They lose to Ohio State, but to me, it shouldn't have came down to that game. They should have beat Iowa on the road. And I think what happened, Wilton Speight got hurt. And I don't know if that made Harbaugh start to get a little bit more conservative. Because, I mean, there was a bunch of quarterbacks that then, like, he had a ton of quarterback injuries. So, Wilton Speight then almost, I think he did break a bone in his neck from the late Purdue hit the following year. And then Dylan McCaffrey broke his collarbone the one game for running the ball. Brandon Peters came into the game against Wisconsin and ended with a concussion. There's a couple other ones. I didn't write them all down. So, I'm wondering if he just became, like, over time, he just became gun shy. Because now you have a quarterback that's built for running and you're not running the ball at all. So is Harbaugh just vetoing it? They're like, hey, we got to run, do a zone read, have the quarterback take it. And Harbaugh's like, nah, that's not safe. Like, I don't know. But somewhere along the line, like, his philosophy changed. And like you said, they're running an old offense. And they are. They're just doing it out of shotgun. Like, you cannot tell me that it's not Harbaugh's offense. Who else? Like, there's no way Josh Gaddis, if you watched him do stuff like Alabama and Penn State, he would not be throwing out 3 tight ends and then running like flat passes. Like they're doing so many things to like get the tight end the ball in space. It's like weird. When Gaddis was a wide receivers coach at Penn State, like he was there was he there when they won the Big Ten? Like they had a bunch of big time receivers like Godwin and a couple other ones I think were all from Penn State, if I'm not mistaken. And so that was his thing. You can't tell me that he went to Michigan and just decided, you know what? I got to get a fullback in there and a bunch of tight ends. Like it's 100% Harbaugh. And so is he on the hot seat? Yes. Will he leave? I think it's 50-50 at this point because he has to decide. I said it last year, my season assessment at the end, I thought him and James Franklin, I think Franklin lost an offensive coordinator, though, so they're in similar situations. And that's why I've been watching both teams together this year. And I think my assessment's the same. You need to reevaluate your offensive coordinators and your defensive coordinators. And you need to get someone in there and let them go. Like, as bad as Michigan is, I sent you the recruiting class. They have a top 10 recruiting class, Matt. Like, how can a team that is just getting pasted, and then one of their top recruits, quarterback, coming in was like telling the class, like, stay together. Like, we're going to come to Michigan and we're going to turn this around. Like, they still believe in him. So that's the one reason where I don't know if it's going to change. As long as Harbaugh's there, he has the power to pull in recruits. He just needs to let go. Like, just let it go. Get an offensive coordinator in. Let him run his stuff. Like, I know you like the tight ends. Perfect. Get a guy that can fit a tight end in there or run it around. Get a guy like Devin Funchess was before he was there. Who was a tight end at Michigan, ran a lot of split stuff where he ended up getting drafted in the NFL as a wide receiver with the Panthers. I think he's with the Colts now. I think he opted out, though. So, like, there are a lot of different ways you can take it. But if he goes, the other thing we're getting, Mark May and a couple other people, it was sent to us, we're saying that maybe Michigan should just hire Urban Meyer. And I said all along, go for it. He's the best coach available. And if Harbaugh decides to go back to the NFL, because even you asked if I thought he would go to the Jets, do the Jets want that headache? Because I'm assuming he's going to want personnel power to bring in a bunch of tight ends and stuff, because that's his thing.
And I think, the draw is also for him to go back. If he's saying that his whole system doesn't work because he doesn't have his quarterback, he could potentially go to the Jets. He could draft Trevor Lawrence, and he could have his franchise quarterback.
I haven't seen him develop a quarterback in 5 or 6 years. How many years has he been in Michigan?
Well, he doesn't have to. Trevor Lawrence is a plug-and-play gamer.
Do you want to see him ruin Trevor Lawrence in 3 years?
Yes.
He will take a sure-thing quarterback and ruin him. Like, it's almost like, and I actually thought about this too after you sent that to me, because there was a time where the 49ers could have had Peyton Manning. And I thought that if they signed him, they were going to win the Super Bowl. And I don't think I would have been wrong, because Peyton Manning ended up winning one with the Broncos with the exact same like basic team build, where you had a bunch of small receivers. They weren't like big name receivers, but your team was built around defense. All you needed was a quarterback that could control the ball and make accurate throws. Like, I really think if Peyton Manning would have went to the 49ers instead of the Broncos, I don't know how many years it would have worked out, but they would have at least won 2 Super Bowls, if not more. Because the 49ers were set up for a run. When they blew up Harbaugh, like, they just blew up the franchise, I think, for a few more years, and then it took a while to rebuild. But they had a workout together, and then it leaked out that Peyton Manning, I think they said that Harbaugh wasn't okay with him calling the plays. And to me, that's just crazy. Like, you just lost the Super Bowl. You're having Peyton Manning fall on your lap. All you have to say is, yeah, okay. Like, I know you've been audibling for the past 10 years at the Colts. Come on over. Take advantage of our defense and get us a Super Bowl. But Harbaugh was kind of like, no. And so that's why I don't think it, no matter where he goes, if he stays at Michigan or if he goes back to the NFL, like, I don't think it would work with Trevor Lawrence. I think he needs a down and out quarterback like Alex Smith was when he got there. He needs a guy that he can build up. So, I don't know. I'm looking around the teams right now to try to get a feel for it. But, I mean, like, would he go to the Lions? I don't even know if Matt Stafford would be around long enough for him to turn that around. But I think that would be a situation where, and that's the type of quarterback I'm thinking about, where a guy that he's been there, he's been consistently solid, but he needs a coach to kind of just put him in that spot where you can say, like, hey, I'm going to turn this around and we're going to be successful. Maybe Mitch Trubisky. I know the Bears aren't looking for a coach, but I think that's where he would be really successful. That's how he won with the 49ers. Once the quarterback situation kind of evened up, though, that's when things started to fall apart with the locker room. But he also had a quarterback controversy there where he pushed Alex Smith out. I think if he would have went back to Alex Smith, he might have still been at the 49ers and never made it to Michigan. But what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's, I think when you look at, even within, like, for as bad as the Jags are, they could potentially, if they were looking to bring him in, the Jags are kind of built in that power run game mindset that if they wanted to pursue someone like Harbaugh, that may be an easier transition for him than to try to continue beating his head against a rock at Michigan.
Actually, the best one would be the Vikings.
I feel like it's a double-edged sword, though, for him, because with the Vikings is not helpful because they have offensive troubles to begin with.
Yeah, but they have Cook. Cook could be their Frank Gore. And I think he would help Cousins, like, just give him the checkdowns. And I think they have, like, enough receiver and options where that team, he could get them to the next level. Like, that might be the best scenario for him to go to the Vikings, to be honest. Because, like, you could always drop a few games to the Packers and no one would blink an eye.
But do you think that they would fire Zimmer?
I don't think so. So, I don't think it's going to work out. That's why I said you would almost have to get a veteran quarterback that's kind of, like, on his last legs. Like, even, like, if they could land, like, a guy, like, if he went to somewhere, like you said, the Jags, and they would end up getting, like, a Jameis Winston. Like, that would be perfect for Harbaugh. Because he's kind of like a project still. And he could build him up. You know he can throw the ball. And with his offense, like, you just need to tone down the mistakes. And Jameis Winston, if he could get those under control, like that, he would be a whole different quarterback. So, I don't know. That's the one thing that they say, like, is he going to leave? Is he going to stick around? I think Michigan kind of recruits itself. I know a lot of people say, oh, that doesn't happen, whatever, because of Rich Rod had some struggles. But I think Rich Rod blew up a bunch of the pipelines. Brady Hoke had no trouble getting top 10 recruiting classes. Harbaugh's in the middle of complete and epic beatdowns, like the worst since 1935 in Michigan football history. That's how bad that loss was on Saturday. And he had no trouble keeping the recruiting class. They actually got a couple commits over the weekend from that, Matt. What guy goes to that game and says, you know what, I really like that? I know they didn't have fans there, but, I mean, unless the first thing you thought was, wow, I could play right now, which I'm assuming a bunch of them did. They're probably like, holy crap, we can just be all freshman starters on this team. So, that's my thing. But the last comment, going back to Urban Meyer, do you think he would come back to coaching, and do you think he would be successful? Or is he a has-been now?
Well, I would say in the ranking of places that it would take to bring him out, I could see him replacing Herman at Texas, because I think Texas would pay a ridiculous amount of money for him. I could see you floated USC, so I would say USC potentially. Because of the success that he had at Ohio State, I just think Michigan's off the table. I just don't. That would be a really bizarre twist.
Well, see, going back to his time at Utah, he said that if he could make a winner out of Notre Dame, Ohio State, or Michigan, he would be a legend. Right now, those other schools you named, they weren't in his original list. But the reason I thought like maybe USC is people don't even consider him as a legendary coach. Everyone only talks about Nick Saban. And I mean, I think it's kind of a slap in the face. I think if there weren't some injuries, he should have won at least one more national championship at Ohio State. They made the playoffs, got shut out by Clemson the one year. But it's kind of like his legacy now is almost forgotten because of the success of Dabo Swinney. And he's young enough where I think he could come back. But like you said, I think there's a couple spots. I think that is the reason why I wouldn't count Michigan out. Because like you said, they could pay. Like there's no other school that's going to pay as much as a Texas, an Ohio State, or a Michigan. I mean, maybe Alabama.
And that's the kind of job that I think you only take at this point in his career, that you take for like a gigantic payout. Like there's some kind of deal, like there's some kind of incentive that it takes care of his family for generations to come. Like that's the kind of deal that you go, all right, this is what's going to bring me out of retirement.
Well, see, it depends on how he's looking at it too, because if he wants to become a legendary coach in in just the all-time scheme of things, he didn't win as long. If he would have won 2 or 3 national championships at Ohio State, I think he would be in that Saban discussion because he couldn't actually get it. now he's forgotten. Like, if we're being honest, Ohio State fans will remember him, and he'll be remembered as a great coach, but he's not in that upper discussion. Like, they just kind of gloss over him now, and you can hear it just on the ESPN. They never mention him. And, like, they still bring up Bobby Bowden and even Joe Paterno. So, like, I think that would have to annoy him a little bit, and that's why I thought USC was in the best position because, like you said, he wouldn't have to deal with Ohio State. He wouldn't have to deal with, if he goes to Texas, he's going to have to deal with Oklahoma. Maybe Notre Dame, but I don't see Brian Kelly leaving now. That was always the rumor that Brian Kelly was going to jump to the NFL. Urban Meyer will just take that and he would ride that to the sunset. And USC was kind of the same thing. But right now, they're not going to be able to fire Todd Helton in a coronavirus season if he's one game out of the playoffs or if they end up winning the conference. Like, they just can't fire him. So where else is he going to go?
Could.
You think they would?
I think they could.
They could, but I just don't see it. So in terms of, like, where can you become a legend? I mean, those are the three programs, because I don't think Notre Dame's going to be open. Those are the three that you could jump into and have success. And it's not like the cupboard's bare. Was Texas in the top 10? USC, Michigan, and Texas all have top 10. Oh, maybe not Texas.
Well, Texas started the year off, top 10? They were supposed to be back.
I was just looking at the recruiting class coming into next year. So, like, next year, Michigan's 9, USC is 8 in terms of the top 10 recruiting class coming in. I would think he would look at that.
But I think in some ways, too, you got to take those recruiting rankings with a grain of salt, because I think what ends up happening at times is, oh, well, they were offered by, and they start looking at some of those comparative lists and going, okay, well, they were because, say, Michigan offered. Okay, well, now Ohio State offers and someone else offers and they commit. Well, then it just automatically throws them into this higher category that maybe they shouldn't be in.
Well, that's where I think if you even look at the composite now, because they combine them. I mean, overall, Texas has top 5 talent, they said, this year. USC's 10, Michigan's down at 17. But even then, you're just looking at, in terms of, like, top-end talent, if you're able to recruit top 10 classes coming in and you're going to push out a bunch of those losing, like, ways, I think you just need to focus on the incoming class. And, I mean, team talent has to be there. I mean, Florida State, because I know you wanted to talk about their rankings, like, they're right at the Michigan level, 16 and 17. They basically have the exact same talent level on the roster this year. So Norvell comes in, and you would think that he would be able to have the team looking at least better than what he does. But you were saying that they had one of the youngest teams in the country.
Well, I think that there were a couple different factors. You know, when I looked at when Taggart was hired, knowing that Jimbo's last couple recruiting classes were supposedly these really high-ranking, like, number 1 overall classes, the expectation was you need to win right now. And the way that he had talked about the program was he was going to win right now. And when you're saying win now and then get blown out by 40, like, there's a serious gap where I feel like with Norvell coming in, he tempered his expectations a lot lower and was like, no, I need to, like, this is a rebuild. And as you see, like, there's so many seniors and juniors that are getting processed out and opting out of the season at this point for whatever reason. He's getting those guys out, and now they're playing a lot of freshmen and sophomores. And the thing that it sucked getting the updates on the Florida State NC State game this past weekend, but what I did see was that they weren't giving up, and that's something promising. That as the score was starting to pile up, you would think that they would start to just completely give in and just take a beating, and they didn't do that. Like, they scored some points later in the game. They have a lot of these younger guys that are are still willing to fight, and I think you build on that. But it takes part of it is getting the recruits in, and then part of it is doing something once they get on campus. And I think that kind of goes back to what you're talking about with Michigan's higher classes. They're bringing in these guys, but then what are you doing with them?
And he's pushing them out anyway. Like, that's why I want to circle back around, too, to the Penn State one, because I think Franklin is even more of a lame duck than Harbaugh. And people are like, well, why would Harbaugh not get fired and Franklin would? Franklin's recruiting class is down, and just to scare Penn State fans, it's at Pitt level right now. Like, they are right above Pitt. I think they have them. They're like 32 and 33 in one ranking and 37 and 38 in another. Like, they're behind NC State, Minnesota, Maryland, Kentucky, Louisville, Missouri. Like, that's not what Penn State fans expect. Like, if Michigan was down that low, and I think they were the transition to Brady Hoke, everyone knew the season was done. I just knew Brady Hoke is over. Like, in Michigan, you can't let when the recruiting drops that much, you're a lame duck coach. So, like, for Franklin to push out a bunch of guys, unfortunately, he lost some with injury and stuff. Okay, you really have no hope coming into next year. Like, if they don't turn it around, and Penn State could turn it around and go 4-4, or how many losses they have now? I don't know. They didn't even win a game yet. So you're looking at,
they may not win a game.
Yeah, they're 0-4, so they would have to go 4-4. Matt, come on. You think they're going to lose to Michigan? Well, I guess it is on the road. Franklin has trouble getting the road team up. I mean, so does Harbaugh. It's like the exact same team. But they have to play Rutgers.
But the thing that I think is a little bit different is I think with Michigan, their play action game does feed well off of their run. So I do think to a certain extent, like, it does piggyback well, where I feel like with Penn State, they're so heavy with their power run game that when they go to throw the ball, it becomes just play action and just chuck it up and hope you get a pass interference penalty. And I mean, we've talked about it when they won their Big Ten championship against Wisconsin. It was literally the second half was just throw the ball 35 feet up in the air and let the cornerback run into him was how they moved the ball down the field.
Yeah, and Wisconsin needed to make some adjustments. Paul Chryst should still be kicking himself because they could have really made the playoffs that year, Wisconsin. But I think
absolutely.
They could. But, I mean, just wrapping this up, I think if you're telling me, okay, these guys are going to bring in new coaches, and like everyone's like joking about the Urban Meyer thing, if talking heads like Mark Mayer are saying it, I mean, they're obviously, they work in the same industry, so they would know that he's most likely leaning towards going back to coaching. I mean, he's young. For him not to just, I mean, the way he's talked about coaching and he wants to be remembered as the best, he's already won at Utah. They should claim a national championship and give him 3 at 3 different schools because I don't see why not at this point. He's running out of time. I guess he's not really running out of time. He's still younger. I think he is younger than Harbaugh, isn't he? If I look it up. But will he jump? He's 56. I mean, Mac Brown came back. So, Harbaugh's 56. So they're both 56 years old. If Harbaugh jumped back to the NFL and then Michigan said, like, who's going to be the coach, I could see it happening. I would put it at a low percent, like 5%. I wouldn't be shocked if it happened because the rumors are that boosters are willing to pay up to $12 million for Urban Meyer. That's a year. So that goes back to what you said. Is he going to get an offer that he can't refuse? And I don't even know if Texas would pay him that. But you're looking at...
If I was looking at Michigan, I'll tell you where I would go for my next coach. And this is, and in a very similar way, this is the direction I would look at as well if Pitt were to fire Pat Narduzzi. I would go to North Dakota State with my checkbook and just say how much.
Yeah, but that's not the same guy, is it?
It's not the same guy, but the scheme is essentially the same.
See, I don't like retreads though.
But it's all they've done with everyone that's been there over the last couple coaches is they've won games.
Yeah, but so has Boise. And only one Boise coach, Chris Peterson, who was the guy that built it, has been successful. So at some point, you're just hiring.
Aren't they ranked right now?
Matt, no one else is playing right now. They already lost to BYU. They got killed by them.
Well, yeah, because BYU's trying to make the holy playoffs this year.
Well, that would be like you're saying like, oh, Harbaugh, he got killed by Ohio State, and you're like, well, yeah, but Michigan's a good school. Like everyone knows that's a joke. Like that's exactly the same type of argument Harbaugh defenders are saying. Like, oh yeah, he got killed by Ohio State, but did you see those other wins over Illinois or Rutgers?
Over Rutgers?
Yeah. So I know North Dakota State. I would say talk to Urban Meyer. He might say no because of the rivalry thing. He might be waiting for Notre Dame. He might see that Notre Dame's never going to open. I don't see him coaching into his 70s. But, I mean, normally he takes 4 or 5 years to get his thing going, and he wins right away. Like, he had Ohio State undefeated the first year, and he took a team that was on sanctions, Matt. So, if he looks at the roster for Michigan and says, like, okay, if Harbaugh announces he's going to the NFL, and Urban Meyer knows he can go with no bad blood other than Ohio State fans, like, I don't even know if Ohio State fans would even be that mad. Because if Ryan Day gets them to the playoffs this year and maybe they win a national championship, are they going to care that Urban Meyer went back? A little bit, but at some point I think that they're just kind of like, whatever. Like, remember when you only won us one national championship? We already have another one. Like, forget you. And then I think that would up the ante and just bring the rivalry back. I think Urban Meyer would know. And he never lost in the rivalry. In the rivalry, he did lose to Michigan at Florida. But maybe. If not, I don't see why they wouldn't look at Luke Fickell. Like, he recruits well. He's in Cincinnati. He's in the playoffs almost right now. There's not going to be like any other big-name coaches that you're going to be able to get. Maybe Matt Campbell at Iowa State. I don't know if he's solid enough. And what are you going to end up doing? Promoting someone else? Like, they need someone that can just recruit.
Well, they need the recruiting, but I think they also have to be willing. They have to be careful with who they would pick if they push Harbaugh out. Because what I would worry about if I were you would be similar to what you saw when they went with Rich Rod. And he went to the spread, and the argument was made to, let him get his guys in. And in a similar way, when Taggart went to the spread compared to Jimbo's pro style, there was arguments that we don't have all the personnel that we need to make this offense work. We need to give him time to get his guys in. And if you're a fan base like Michigan, like Florida State, that expects to win immediately, you're not going to be are you going to be patient enough to let that process work its way through?
Well, I think with him, I mean, Harbaugh's only been getting 10-win seasons. His recruiting's been so well, and he has been recruiting more of the spread guys. That's why it's boggling to me that you're putting in really young tight ends that have problem holding onto the ball and has like 10 drops already. It's like at some point, what happened to all the receivers? There's like a highly touted receiver that's on the roster that only gets in for the handoff on the sweep. So it's like every time he goes in, I know he's going to either get a sweep or he's not going to touch the ball at all. So it's like, what are you doing? So I know that they have the personnel to maybe not do the switch. It depends on the quarterback. I think pushing Dylan McCaffrey out was a huge mistake. And I don't know if it was the injury thing or whatever. I still think he should have been quarterback over Shea Patterson. And I think that that's what really killed Harbaugh. Shea came out, had some bad games, but he knew that he took him as a transfer. And I just feel like he talked all that stuff about, hey, it's a meritocracy. Whoever's playing the best is going to play. And I think the players realized that was all bullshit. And that's why he lost the locker room. And I think you can go back to that. And even if you watch the documentary on Amazon before that happened, I think you started to see a little bit of that. And I only think that Michigan had another close season with that revenge tour year because of the seniors on that team. Because of guys like Chase Winovich that are now doing pretty well in the NFL. Like Michael Owenu, I think, is one of the top guys on the Patriots. He might win like Rookie of the Year or whatever. I think it was this year. Maybe he came out last year. But like I think it was just so many seniors on that team really elevated the team. And now that those guys are gone and it is a young team, Harbaugh just has no idea. And he doesn't have the locker room. And so if you watch the game and they run out against Wisconsin, no one cared. And I was like, this game's done. When the players come out flat in a big ranked game at home, I know there's no fans, but you needed one shot to turn your team around. And so we'll see which approach works, because Florida State, they're doing the rebuild. How many years do you think they give them?
To me, I think it becomes a matter of seeing the progress on the field. And year one is tough. And I'm going to give Norvell a little bit of slack because of having spring practices cut short because of COVID and trying to get everyone back, in the shortened time frame that normally they would have more time with the kids. But from what I'm seeing, they're getting the right type of players in, I think, is the first thing, and trying to weed out some of the problem behavior stuff that has really plagued them. I mean, I think the last couple of years, Florida State's been one of the most penalized teams in all of college football. Like, you can't do that. And they got to get back to being more disciplined and playing better overall. I think all phases they can improve, but I think where you start to lose fans is where they're not putting forth the effort and there's no fight. Like, at least you're seeing where they're trying to get back into the game. They're scoring points late. They're doing things. They're executing the scheme. When you start to see that there's just no trying, and I think that, like, I see it with Florida State and I see it at times with Michigan too. The offense doesn't help the defense at all. So you get out there and you run the ball, drop a pass, and then punt, and then the defense is back on the field, and they have to stop them immediately. It has to be a 3-and-out, or else the offense gets the ball pinned deep, run the ball, punt. You take no time off the clock. You turn it back over to a short field because they end up like punting. The other team gets the ball in their own territory, and it hurts. So it puts so much extra stress on the defense that they're just always on the field. And eventually, when you get enough chances at the plate, you're going to hit a home run. And I think that's what you see a lot with Florida State, which going up against Clemson this week, it's a tough spread to try to cover.
That's why I think Harbaugh's been talking so much trash on Ryan Day and calling him out at the press conference, and he said he was going to score 100 on Michigan. That could happen. If he runs the score up to 100, Harbaugh is fired. There's no way they bring him back. So
that's a Mortal Kombat. Finish him.
Because, well, like you said, they came out, and I think Michigan had like 2 turnovers the first 2 series, and Harbaugh made no adjustments. Like, your quarterback's been struggling, make a change. Like, you pushed out the starting quarterback. He's still taking classes. Dylan McCaffrey, he was the number 1 guy. You had him on a team. His brother just led Nebraska to a win over Penn State. So you can say, like, oh, that's not a big deal. Penn State's not good. And then you'll watch Michigan lose to Penn State in a couple weeks. It's like, I don't understand what kind of coaching decisions you're making. And so that's where I think another coach coming in, if you get a guy like Luke Fickell, or if you're able to sway like Urban Meyer, and I'm not saying those are the only 2 guys, but you get a guy like that can take advantage of the talent, and I think Harbaugh's roster would pretty much be complementary to Luke Fickell. Then why not give it a go? I know everyone says, like, oh, he went to Ohio State. There's no way he would coach at Michigan. Like, if you're worried about your legacy, everyone already knows you were successful at Ohio State. If you stayed at Cincinnati and didn't go to Michigan, and then for whatever reason, like, Ohio State had a chance to hire you. You were the interim coach. They passed you over. They could have aggressively tried to get you. Instead, they just hired Ryan Day. Like, Luke Fickell, unless Ryan Day goes to the NFL this year, Luke Fickell's not going to ever be the Buckeyes coach, I don't think. So why wouldn't he try to go up, unless he just becomes like other Ohio State coaches and just goes to Michigan State. But they didn't even hire him. I think they tried, and he was like, "You guys, it's signing day." like, what are you guys doing? So, but that's going to be the big kicker because Penn State might be open too. And who do they bring in? Because if they end up going 0-8 and they have a poor recruiting class, like, are the boosters going to continue to pay for James Franklin, or is he just going to hang around for 3 years? It's going to be interesting to see. I know we're pretty much wrapped up, though. I had one other question. Can Cincinnati or BYU make the playoffs this year?
There's an outside chance that I think they could, but it's doubtful.
Oh, I think they 100% should. And I think you're right that it's going to be doubtful. And I'm hoping that it expands the playoffs. Because I think that would help a lot of, like, the rebuilds at Florida State and Michigan. They're so worried about keeping other teams out that they're not looking at the big picture. It's very rare. Like, it's taken a pandemic to have a season where you have 2 or 3 independent or smaller schools that could make the playoffs. If you expand it, all you're doing is letting your other big brands in that used to be your money makers. Miami, that hasn't had a chance, they might have a chance this year if it was expanded. If Florida State comes back, there was a couple of years when Harbaugh came in. If it was expanded, he could have maybe brought Michigan back. Because in an expanded playoffs, they would have made it. And then that might have helped recruiting enough to keep them relevant. Now, like, same with USC, Texas, they were close a few years. But now, because they're not actually in the playoffs, they're not capitalizing, and so you're losing your big money football schools.
But I think a big part of that is you have to win. You have to win within your conference. Win the be in that discussion and not get absolutely destroyed. Because look at what the SEC's doing. They're finding ways to have Georgia in the discussion, Alabama in the discussion. Somehow Auburn always ends up there. Like, they end up with like 3 or 4 teams from the SEC that manage to still be in the discussion for the playoffs. If you're competitive within your conference, that window's a lot tighter for your Cincy's and your BYU's because they're not Power 5.
Well, I will say I think the SEC got lucky. They got lucky with it because of the Auburn kick 6. Because when Alabama started to get left out, or they started to get like extra losses, allowing other teams to sneak in, like Georgia making the playoffs with Alabama, that elevated recruiting in the conference itself. Whereas other schools like Oregon, they make it, I think was it Washington that made it with Chris Peterson? Like, they've made it, they've gotten killed. Their recruiting hasn't really picked up. I know Oregon's high and USC's high, but like Clemson's at a level now where they're recruiting so much better than the rest of the conference. And same with Ohio State, because they're the only team in that conference that has a chance to make the playoffs. They're the only teams from that conference that have made the playoffs other than Florida State the first year. So you're looking at that, and I think it's very easy to say, hey, you're from this region and you're the best, come play for us if you want to be in the playoffs. I mean, like, even Notre Dame right now, they're top of the ACC. Their recruiting hasn't picked up for next year. And I know normally it's a delayed thing, but people don't take them seriously. And if Clemson beats them and makes the playoffs and Notre Dame doesn't, it's just going to make other recruits just keep thinking, okay, we got to go to Clemson. Like, even Notre Dame, they're going to be hurt by it. And so I think if you expand it and you give them, okay, well, now recruits are seeing them in the playoffs, even if they're losing. Like, all right, so now Washington's making it every 2 or 3 years or whatever, instead of like once every decade. I think that you're getting your bigger schools back into it, because right now it's so specialized. You're not bringing in extra fans, and I think that's why their ratings are hurting. Even this year, like, Michigan's down. I had it up. I don't think I saved it, though. The viewership in the game against Wisconsin was only 4 million. I think the Notre Dame Boston College game was the game of the week most watched, and it was only at 5 million. Like, people don't realize, like, when Michigan beat Florida in that one early season game, like 10 million people watched it or whatever. Like, you're getting half your value because a lot of your big schools people don't care about anymore because they have no chance to do anything. And so some of those schools, like Michigan's always going to pull one of the top viewerships. Same with like Notre Dame, even if Notre Dame wasn't in the ACC this year or whatever. And so by keeping Cincinnati out, and I think they're really killing their sport because they're like, oh, we got to keep these smaller guys out. When to me, I think they should just be opening it up to 8 teams at least. I would argue for automatic conference bids. But 8 teams, I think, would at least give you, okay, now we can feed a couple more teams that used to bring us a ton of money. And right now, there's not enough mouths to feed. We're getting the same 3 or 4 teams in the playoffs every year. Every year. Like you can say you got to win the conference, but that stuff's cyclical. And even if Texas upsets Oklahoma, they don't make the playoffs. Recruits see that. Oklahoma says, like, yeah, they beat us, but we were the ones in the playoffs, right? And so they have no rebuttal. So if you give them a chance where they're both in the playoffs, even if they win or lose the conference, that's the only way you're going to get it in. Because otherwise, you're going to be like a Penn State. You win the conference, what did they get from that? Absolutely nothing. Ohio State made the playoffs. Ohio State got the recruiting bump. Penn State got nothing. No recruit could look at that team and say, you know what? I'm going to go to Penn State because I get to play. Who did they even play that year? Was it Memphis? Like, I don't even think they got a good bowl game that year, Matt. So it's like, that's why I look at the BYU and Cincinnati's. If I'm a fan of like those second-tier schools, like Iowa, I could even say Penn State right now, like Michigan right now, the teams that haven't made the playoffs, which is almost everybody, I'm cheering for one of them to get in because I think that will expand the playoffs. And I think it just helps the sport as a whole. Like you were saying, Boise State, like they're ranked. Whoop-de-doo. What does that get them? A Detroit Bowl in December? Doesn't help the sport. You got anything for the final bell? I know we were going long.
No doubt. Just good to be able to keep talking football. We got some good things going with the Steelers. Hopefully they keep it rolling.
Well, here's a big game for you. We don't really do picks, but I know sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. It's not a consistent thing because it's hard to know which games are going to be canceled and postponed. It's just a weird year. So if you want us to do them, let us know. Maybe we'll even do them just on Twitter as the games come up. I don't know. I haven't even been doing social media stuff. We're still getting downloads, so thanks for listening. But in terms of like the teams sneaking in, Matt, Liberty at NC State, ACC school, undefeated Liberty, who do you have?
I want to see Liberty win out because I think if they do, I think that with the ongoing interest of Hugh Freeze to South Carolina being rumored, I think that maybe that gives Liberty a little bit of an extra incentive because if they knock off NC State this week, the only other really big matchup that they have is ranked Coastal Carolina at the end of the year, which their coach is being rumored for some of these Power 5 jobs as well. That it could make for an interesting matchup to see one of those two push for a seat at the table.
And that's why I'm looking at it and I'm saying, okay, if people that they want like, oh, we only have 4 teams and we want the 4 best teams, like the 4 best teams, like you don't even know that. Like Clemson, when they kept saying like, oh, Clemson was clearly the 4 best team, you mean that team that lost to Pitt? It's like, you don't know. It depends on what team shows up. So you're having a year this year where, Coastal Carolina's undefeated, Liberty's undefeated, BYU's undefeated, and they've already beat the hard part of their schedule. If they falter down the line, that's on them. Cincinnati, they have, ECU, they blew out. They're blowing out teams, Matt, and they're running it up now because they know that they have to have a chance. And Marshall's undefeated. They're even talking about maybe having more of the undefeated teams try to squeeze in another game before the picks. Because Mountain West has Nevada and San Jose State undefeated still, and I know they started later. But you could take some of these undefeated teams and you could have your own like mini playoff this year. And I think that if they get left out with the way the bowl games there are, I wish those other conferences would go ahead and just announce their own like mini playoff. because I think there's a good chance that there might be at least four teams that are undefeated still. Why not? Like, why not call up and say, hey, we're going to do a MAC versus AAC versus BYU and Liberty. You have Liberty and BYU play on the independent side. You have Cincinnati and Marshall play if they're both undefeated on the MAC side. If it ends up being Coastal Carolina instead of Liberty, you have them in. And then they just have their own other playoff. And see which one gets a bunch of viewers, because I guarantee that one would get watched a lot. Because are they going to watch Clemson, Alabama 9? Or are they going to watch Cincinnati and BYU? Because I would watch that. They might not get all the viewers, but I still think they would get a significant clump if they were just having their own and they were naming themselves national championship, like the national championship. Because there's no rule that says that they can't. Because by definition, to make it a ripoff to these schools, they named the CFP as an invitational mat. That's why UCF was able to claim a national championship, and none of those other schools could do anything. UCF, I hope I said it right. So UCF claims a national championship because they could.
Well, that's the argument that I've had with a lot of these other schools like Cincy, BYU, Liberty. Win your games, and they're gonna even if you don't make the playoffs, you're gonna get a tough matchup for the playoffs. If that you win all your games, including your bowl game, and you're undefeated at the end of the year, raise a banner. I don't have an issue with that.
And I think a lot of them are just scared because they don't want to ruin whatever they think their seat at the table. Like UCF was really trying to get into the Big 12. And they didn't get taken advantage. They didn't get to take advantage of that. Scott Frost jumps to Nebraska where no one's talking about it, but he's been a complete failure there. Like, you're talking about how many years do you get to rebuild? I don't even know why his system, I don't know. We're not going to get into it because it's already too long of a show. But they just don't want to get any other teams upset. And then other fans will just attack them. But 100%, that's why I think if they're all undefeated, I think they should just play and name themselves national champs. And then whatever, what are they going to say? Clemson or Alabama's going to complain? And they'll say, just play us. And they won't. Could you imagine if the winner, Cincinnati, won, and then they had to play Clemson or someone, and they ended up beating them? College football would just explode. Because it could happen. Because could you imagine if Notre Dame won? And Notre Dame's not that much more talented. It's not like Cincinnati would be playing Alabama where they would be outclassed in talent. What if a Notre Dame got to the championship and they beat it, and Cincinnati's yeah, we won our tournament too. We're both national champs. And Notre Dame, they're oh no, we can't have this. They play them and lose. It would blow up college football. So I want to see it happen. Go for it. Get the other schools back in. So thanks for listening. I know football, we usually go long anyway. That's actually not as long as I thought. We've had longer shows recently. If there's anything you want us to talk about, let us know. The Steelers are still undefeated. So we'll be doing some stuff for the NFL playoffs, but it's hard to plan, honestly. They keep canceling college football games. There's 3, including Miami, that's canceled. A&M, which is postponed. I guess there might be just postponed. Even the Marshall they were talking about. So it's hard to know, okay, is Marshall going to be defeated? Or are they going to play more than 7 games? We don't know. So if you like sports, though, let us know if you want to call in. Whatever, go to southboundsports.com. Reach out. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.